Let's also bring in Newt Gingrich this morning, Fox News contributor, former presidential candidate, and author of Trump and the American Future. Good morning to you, Newt.
Good morning. It's great to be with you.
Good morning. Great to be with you. Exciting time for our country. DNC kicks off this week, RNC next week. Bernie Sanders is going to be speaking tonight for 8 minutes from Vermont. The average speech is about 2 minutes. This is what Bernie said about what we can expect.
One of the points that I will make is that the progressive movement has been making enormous progress, not only in electing candidates to Congress, not only in electing candidates to state legislatures, but also electing candidates who are running for district attorney, who are transforming criminal justice in America.
So when you hear a message like that, we're going to go so progressive. And you know, Kamala Harris, if you look at her voting record, she's a radical in the way that she voted. But then Biden is an establishment Democrat. So what's the direction of this party?
Well, look, I think that in my newsletter this week is going to say that this will be the high watermark before the collapse of the Biden-Harris ticket, which I think will collapse, and probably by Election Day will resemble George McGovern in 1972. Really? You know, Rasmussen just came out and said 55% of the country does not think Biden will complete his first term, which means people are going to be looking at Harris as a president, not a vice president. At the same time, 39% of the country, according to Rasmussen, thinks that Biden has significant cognitive problems. And they just sent out this really pathetic thing from the Biden-Harris campaign headquarters that said these two people are ready to lead from day one. And they have this weird picture of Harris and Biden in masks, both of them looking down like they don't want to fall. And that was their fundraising. They wanted $5 for it. I didn't send it in. But it just gives you a flavor of where they're going. One other point, by the way, you know, the police chief in Chicago believes that precisely the district attorneys that Bernie Sanders is proud of is the reason you're seeing an explosion in crime, because all of these George Soros-funded hard-left district attorneys refuse to prosecute criminals, put them back on the street, where they go back to committing more crimes. So what Sanders thinks is terrific blew up in Chicago, has blown up in Seattle, has blown up in Portland. I think that it's madness that these people cannot figure out when you put criminals back on the street, you encourage them to commit more crimes.
All right, so let's talk about the election where it's at. I get it, polling, no one trusts them, but they do show trends. Wall Street Journal has a poll out, 50 to 41. It turns out that they believe Biden's winning. However, the CNN poll, which had Trump trailing by 14 points on June 2nd, now has him within 4 on all between August 12th and the 15th, after Harris was named. What's your take on that?
Well, first of all, I don't think we know anything. And I've been through lots of elections. Harry Truman was down 13 points in September and won the campaign. George H.W. Bush was down 19 and won the campaign. So I'm very dubious about it. I do think that the contrast, I mean, think about what we're going to see this week. Donald Trump goes to Wisconsin, where Biden is supposed to be. And Biden doesn't have the guts to go to Milwaukee. But Trump has the guts to go to Wisconsin, even though he's not getting nominated this week. And by the way, remember, accepting the nomination from the White House is something Franklin Delano Roosevelt did. This is not inappropriate for the president to do that. But I just think the contrast you're going to see day after day. I mean, Harris is so far to the left. And I wrote a column last week saying flatly she's an anti-Catholic bigot. And I listed item by item by item. She was a disaster. She started at 15%, dropped to 4% before she dropped out before a single vote was cast. Why would you pick somebody to be the vice presidential candidate who collapsed from 15 to 4 during the primaries, showed no ability to attract black votes? In fact, I think there were 5 Democrats getting a larger share of the black vote than Harris. And I just think she's going to be the worst vice presidential nominee since Tom Eagleton had to resign in 1972 for having had electric shock treatments for depression. I think she's going to be a disaster.
When you look at Joe Biden, the president famously talks about how every other time he's run for president, he's only gotten 1% of the votes. So it is what it is. Newt,
no, he will do better than that. I bet Biden will get more than.
You don't believe the poll?
Yeah, fake news.
I think he'll get more than 1%.
All right.
That's all I'll say.
So, Newt, the number one topic over the last 48 hours has been how the post office is not prepared for the election. And the reason is because the postal officials came out and said, you know, there are certain states where you can request a ballot up till about 48 hours before Election Day, and we can't get it out, we can't get it back. Can you please explain to the folks watching why the post office is messed up? And it's been messed up since you were Speaker.
Well, first of all, as the Postmaster General has tried to say, to no avail with the national left-wing media, the post office handles enormous number of mail at Christmas. This is not a question about the volume of mail. The problem is you have some states, New York State, for example, they just took 9 weeks to count a congressional primary, 9 weeks. That would mean they wouldn't finish counting the presidential campaign until after the constitutional requirement to vote on the Electoral College in December 20th. I think the postmaster's concern isn't the post office. It's a series of states that are so incompetent that if you suddenly try to pile this whole thing into 2 or 3 or 4 days, they're going to have thousands of ballots that they throw out. They're going to have tremendous problems counting them. And I think the post office can handle the mail. Now, I think maybe the states ought to have to say, you've got to have your ballot in 3 days earlier, or it's got to be postmarked as of Election Day. All of that the post office can handle. This is a bad rap the post office is getting. It isn't the problem. The problem is you start doing what Nevada's doing, where they said they want to send out a ballot to everybody, and the post office came back and said, look, 200,000 of these names don't live there. They're not there anymore. Why would we send a ballot to sit at an apartment complex for some political crony to pick it up, to vote it illegally? And so that's the problem is not voting by mail. If it's an absentee ballot, if we know who you are, perfectly legitimate. The president said this over and over again. The problem is mass mailings to people who may be dead. I think in Michigan last week, they announced that there were 800 and some ballots disqualified because the voter was dead. Now, it is an old tradition in Chicago that you're allowed to vote for at least 3 generations after you die. But in most of the country, that's not a legitimate tradition. And I think it's just a reminder to people, if you want to have an honest, accurate election, you can do it. And you can have the post office help you do it. They do it in Washington State. They do it in Oregon. They know how to do this. But you go to this wide open, send out letters to everybody, even if they don't exist, even if they moved. The guy was telling me that he'd left California 21 years ago and still gets a ballot to vote. And so that's why I think the difference. But I think the post office can handle this. I'm not worried about that. The states can't. There are a number of states that cannot do this. They'll collapse.
Newt, thanks so much for joining us.
Glad to be with you.